Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This month, Creator discusses the revelations of a contemporary Christian seer. So this is built off a couple of books read by a guy named, suddenly I'm drawing a blank, John Fenn. And he's a we've checked with Creator and confirmed that indeed he sees Jesus on a regular basis, very, very similar to St. Faustina, which we covered in detail. So he's more of a fundamentalist bent, whereas Faustina was Catholic. So we thought we would go down this road and see what we can uncover, Carl.
Well, it's interesting to talk to people who know things, and the people who are highly intuitive get impressions of all sorts of phenomena and sometimes knowings about deep truths, because it's the way the system is actually intended to operate, to have divine inspiration that gets noticed. So these people have an extra fine tuning and a kind of a better radar, like the bat hearing, they can pick up subtle workings of the divine and the guidance and upliftment and inspiration. So they will often have even higher awareness than that. Most people get some kind of guidance from their higher self, if not Creator directly, and usually both. But this is another way of kind of cross-checking our information, because it's always fun to look at what other people are seeing who are at least uncorrupted, as best we can be reassured of that.
Agreed. You asked Creator, perhaps a helpful means of knowing the importance of a mission life like Jesus Christ is learning about what the state of humanity would be if Christ had not taken up his mission life to begin with. What can Creator tell us?
All right, these are Creator's words as I channeled them. To many around the world, Christ deserves only faint praise at this point for seeming to have had momentum in influencing things, but seeing that as on the wane, have concluded it is more like a passing fad, and even if real, was essentially a failed mission to win over the world and conquer evil. We beg to differ, because we see a bigger picture than you or anyone, and we can tell you with confidence and conviction that if Jesus Christ had not taken on that mission life, the world would have gone down and humanity would be no more. At this point, even 2 millennia on, you would still be up in the light, licking your wounds with no world to come back to, and a complete interruption of Creator's plan for solving the problem of evil in the Milky Way galaxy, and the many worlds under duress would continue to be plundered for millennia still, with nothing to stop it. Whereas, on the contrary, despite the waxing and waning of religious interest and fervor in the masses, the many lightworkers are here buoyed on the wings of Jesus Christ and other lightworkers through the ages who have kept hope alive and focused on the cause of the divine as the most worthwhile of endeavors one can undertake. And then here you are, and your followers of Get Wisdom in the trenches and preparing to lead the way to victory if you do not slack off or other unforeseen circumstances undermine you enough to cause failure. While this has happened many, many times, there has always been a resurgence, and the life of sacrifice made by Jesus Christ, in being such an outstanding living demonstration of divinity, has reassured and inspired legions of fellow humans through the ages to keep going and not surrender to the darkness. This is a life worth living and was lived well. The dark outcome was predictable and, in fact, was foreseen by Jesus Christ himself. The point of his mission was not to come and be a sacrificial lamb, but to come in spite of that and show what can happen when people are in divine alignment. That is when the miracles come forth. He was showing the way to those following him and the many who followed in subsequent generations. That light has never been extinguished and never will be, because that, in part, is the light you all are shining today. You are all interconnected, working for the same principles, the same sense of duty, and the desire for saving the misguided, the lost, and even the evil ones from the consequences of their poor choices. That is divinity on the march, and why you yourselves are divine, but few know this.
Well, we can probably extract from this what we've learned in past channelings and shows about the fact that World War II was intended to be human annihilation, and that what changed the outcome was prayer and the extremely large number of Christian pastors, especially in the Western Allied forces, that were amongst the troops and that encouraged. And prayer was a huge, undertaking on the part of troops and their families back home. Um, there were services held on aircraft carriers that were, most of the crew would turn out. I mean, the faith was very, very strong, especially in the Allied forces in World War II. And you can credit Jesus with that completely, I think.
Well, it's a good example of the influence, the handed down influence of belief, because it really stuck. Those churches that our generation grew up around were, a direct lineage of that, planting the seed of divine truth and the wisdom to know that God is the answer and partnering with God is the solution for any dilemma. And we're seeing that play out, but furtively, fleetingly, and tentatively more and more, with things going downhill with the secular movement undermining the faithful. So this is a kind of wake up call to show us that we were on the right track after all. Hello, you're giving up your lifeline here when you give up on God. However you do that, it doesn't have to be through Christianity, and the fundamentalists wouldn't want to hear that, I'm sure. But God is revenue neutral. God accepts people of all faiths and the unfaithful as well, at least
Yes.
provisionally. They themselves are turning their back on the divine. So it isn't God judging them and casting them out. They're casting themselves out without realizing how devastating that's going to be.
Agreed. U.S. Creator. Pastor John Fenn is a modern fundamentalist equivalent of St. Faustina, who was a Catholic saint, in that he first had direct experience of seeing and conversing with Jesus at the age of 17 and consistently since that time. Today he is 64 years old. He has seen Jesus almost weekly and can converse with him and also with his own personal angel pretty much any time. Fenn wrote 2 books where he described a trip to heaven his angel took him on. While there, he observed a number of residents he said were vested with authority, quote unquote. He wrote, "These people were in charge of galaxies that currently exist, yet there is nothing in the way of creation going on in them. There was an air of expectancy while they were waiting. Each of them had the same sense of waiting for other things to happen before it would be time for them to move in their authority," unquote. Are the, quote, other things to happen, unquote, the solving of the problem of evil? What can Creator tell us?
Okay, this is a good example of why we enjoy getting these kind of inklings from others, because it can pose new questions and show a new facet of this dynamic that's unfolding here. So all these people up in the heavens, presumably waiting for something big to happen. Okay, what is it? Creator says this is an insightful and perceptive analysis of that experience and its true meaning. Things are literally on hold. The creation was launched in the beginning as told by the scriptures, but it is still in a middle phase and has far to go. This has all been on hold pending the outcome of the experiment underway in your own galaxy. The question of whether free will and free agency, with a suspension to a large extent of the law of karma in bringing about an immediate reckoning of any kind of misalignment, will end in disaster because it allows too great a freedom, too great a latitude to resist temptation for the accumulation of personal power and an appeal to the ego that will undermine a person spiritually, morally, and ethically. That is what has befallen the physical beings within the Milky Way galaxy, starting with the Anunnaki extraterrestrial race, and then a succession of others following suit, becoming corrupted by the touch of evil from the dark angelic spirits, the fallen, who turned away from God eons ago as victims of their own ego, and now live as predators, corrupting and undermining the living beings of your galaxy, humanity included. That is the unfortunate end product of the fall from grace they started. It is spread everywhere. The question now is whether humanity can stop it, even though no other race of beings heretofore has been successful. You have the greatest of chances compared to prior attempts, and you are nearing a turning point that will determine success or failure. There are many of you still in the light. On the one hand, worrying about whether you will succeed in your mission to solve the problem of evil and allow the further expansion of the universe that will involve all of you as ambassadors of light, who will help to manage and mentor many new worlds of beings and a glorious expansion of possibilities throughout the universe. Or conversely, experience a grand failure, leaving in doubt the feasibility of Creator's plan for you and necessitating a complete reworking of things. That can even include the dissolution of the entire visible universe and a starting over from scratch in a new configuration. As soul-based beings, you would be waiting to see the plan develop and would be introduced yet again as light beings in the new universe, but would be starting out at the bottom of a long, long and difficult journey to rework the current paradigm. That might take billions of years. So there is much at stake in your success or failure, and it will truly be up to you which future you will have.
Well, there's just so many remarkable things about this. For one, it's very, very difficult, if darn near almost impossible, to get corroboration on a lot of things the Creator has said to you, Carl, and or brought forth through you with the Get Wisdom Project. And kind of knowing what's going on in heaven is one of those things that's very difficult to validate. But yet here it is. Here's testimony from an unrelated individual to Get Wisdom completely, and yet it's almost spot on, and it's almost miraculous how I even came across it. I was going through some YouTube videos, and it came up on a suggested feed to check out this one conversation, and so I clicked on it, and it was interesting enough. I said, "Who is this guy? Maybe I'll get a hold of his book, take a look at it." And I was led by a breadcrumb trail essentially to this particular quote. And it was like, wow, amazing how this stuff works. But we have validation, for really the first time on some of this stuff, Carl.
Yeah, it fits perfectly with all that we understand from Creator about the dilemma and why we're here, what it will mean to the broad future of the universe. But we haven't thought about, what are the guys up there in the light doing, and the beings in other worlds that might already be in place and have a quite restricted experience pending the outcome of what we can do to support this idea of greater freedom and latitude, greater personal power and authority, basically. So this is a completely independent perspective in being a witness to a divine awareness and communication of reality.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing, and it's amazing how I came across it. I mean, the odds of just coming across this. It's a needle in a haystack, but it found its way. So it's interesting. U.S. creator Fenn wrote that in prayer one day he asked God about the stars and got this answer: "Quote: I created the whole universe to day one. What you see in the stars is what I did in the beginning. When I turned my attention to the earth to complete it, then I turned my attention to the earth to complete it. There will come a time when I will again turn my attention to the rest of the universe to complete its creation, and this is part of what you saw, which will take place in the ages to come." Unquote. What can Creator tell us?
Creator says, this was an accurate, if still incomplete, description of prior events, their meaning, and what will be coming if humanity is successful in solving the problem of evil for your galaxy, and thus for the paradigm of greater individual free agency and free will. So, this is a message from us, providing further clarification of what other beings of light knew, whom he witnessed in his journey to the heavenly realm, and were waiting in the wings, quite literally, for new worlds to come about, over which they would have influence and a role in guiding things forward, and the creation of many new souls to inhabit those worlds. One day, you will be either waiting in the wings for countless eons or ascending to a higher and more glorious level of existence and participate directly in what everyone here has been waiting for since the creation of the universe began. You and your brethren will provide the turning point that will head in one direction or the other, a glorious ascension to a new way of living and a higher level of functioning and capability and influence than ever before, or a disappointing retrenchment that will leave you with nothing new to utilize your talents for an extended period of reworking of things by us.
You know, it's probably a little bit worse than that because Creator says we've been waiting for this since the beginning of the universe, when in fact we've probably been waiting for this since the failure of the last divine free will project, which would have been in the last universe. But once the project fails, there still has to be a winding down period that could take billions of years itself. So we've probably been waiting longer than that, Carl.
Yeah, a lot of eons being bored in bliss. How terrible a fate, but but boredom is boredom, and let's get on with it. Let's do something new and fun and exciting and expansive. People are fearful of the unknown, but that's where your variety of experience brings a reward of upliftment and a broader horizon personally, and understanding more, being more capable, more knowledgeable, more experienced, all of that. So this is on a grand scale, not just like a human level life and a career where you learn to have certain skills and you ply your trade and you're successful, maybe famous for it, like an artist or musician or performer of some kind, or a brilliant thinker. But this is a world level capability on the part of individuals who are trained and raised up in the process of taking on adversity. So they become experts in facing evil and overcoming it. That's
Yes.
what Creator needs to see happen before unleashing this concept on a wider scale. Right now, it's just our galaxy. That's what we've been told. This is the only place where there's free will to the extent we enjoy, and
Right.
free agency.
And it hasn't been easy. And we're not
It's
there
not
yet,
going
people.
well right now either.
No, it's not. It's not going well at all, actually. We got to change that. U.S. creator Fenn reports that he asked his angel about God the Father's goodness and reported being immediately whisked away in spirit to visit a poor country in Africa. where he witnessed a small farmer desperately searching for a buyer for his crop before it rotted in just a few days. After many foot trips back and forth with a small cart and part of his crop, he finally connected with a woman who agreed to buy his entire crop, and his fortune switched from dire to blessed in a single instant. The angel explained that God the Father arranged everything so that this small, humble farmer would receive a reward for all of his hard work, and that his family would have what was needed. How much of the average person's life is arranged in just this way? Is every human's life arranged in this way? What can Creator tell us?
All right, Creator says, this is an important lesson in what is real and what is assumed. Humanity has the wrong view of us, thinking of us as an all-powerful father presiding over his children and willing to step in and heal their hurts, pick them up, dust them off, set them free again when they've transgressed, forgive their sins, and manage their lives to bring about fairness, joy, and happiness for anyone who is a true believer, or so the story goes. This is a scenario of partial truths only. For the true understanding of that experience in seeing the plight of the humble farmer rewarded by divine grace was not that God manages people's lives and deserving few are rewarded, and it is only a matter of faith and devotion to prove one's worth needed to receive the same divine beneficence. In reality, that farmer was rewarded as a consequence of his own divine actions, because he had a refined and true spiritual core and lived according to divine principles in divine alignment. He created his own future. So even though he was challenged along the way, as all are, being in the physical, a tough arena of fierce competition and many, many hazards and pitfalls that can easily ensnare a person and drag them down, he held true to his morality and ethics and weathered the storms of life, and created the future reward that was ultimately witnessed of being in the right place at the right time. What he was doing was partnering with the divine all along the way during his life. So by doing this, he paved the way for that beneficent future where he could easily have been decimated and his entire family perished from his failure to provide, but instead was met by divine grace, fulfilling our part of a bargain he, in effect, had ensured through his meeting us halfway in partnership and fulfilling his obligations to do the hard work and conscientious attention to his responsibilities and obligations, not just for himself, but his family as well. This was a blessing for himself and for his family, and all were rewarded by an arranged rescue. But that was not a unilateral act of charity, but the fulfilling of a contract, in effect, launched by a man of faith with strong inner convictions and a sense of purpose for the betterment of himself and his family. And he was a true blessing to these loved ones as well as to his own soul in the outcome. The lesson here is that you are not on your own and subservient, and only through obedience and devotion will we pay attention. It is not our demands that need to be met. It is your own desire for living in divine alignment that will bring you close to us and us close to you. When we are walking side by side with you, hand in hand, you gain our power in ways that would otherwise never happen when you are on your own and living by your own wits and meager resources. In your world, it is you that have power. If you choose to use that power to partner with us, you will become more powerful. It is all up to you as we follow your lead.
So this is fascinating on so many levels because he reports, being brought to Africa in spirit. So it's a vision, so to speak, but a wholly immersive one that included every aspect of psychic phenomena, clairaudience, clairvoyance. I mean, he felt like he was there in the physical, even though he truly wasn't. He was brought there in spirit. But he was able to witness it in 3D, right, in living color with all the accoutrements, involved. So you say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but How much is a picture with sound and breeze and atmosphere and all the other things going on? Maybe it's worth a million words. And yet, on top of that, he still had to come to his own conclusion about things because the divine can't lead, right? It can only, he asked the question, and this angel tried to provide a realistic scenario to provide the answer for him without actually filling in the blanks.
Yes.
So it's interesting. It's this fascinating event.
Well, this is why we're here doing channeling with Creator directly to help raise up the dialogue to a higher level of understanding and depth. Because this is a perfect textbook case of someone who sees the divine in action, but draws the wrong conclusion
Yeah,
from witnessing this episode. And God bless him, he was acting in a divine way, doing divine work, but it only took him so far because ultimately it's how much you know and how much savvy you have that determines what you'll make of that experience. So
yes,
he came away thinking God's involved in everything and that,
yeah,
we're set, we just align with God, you're fine, and that's not the message. The message is you must be in divine alignment, but what you do will make good things happen because it's a dynamic of partnering where you have to hold your end up. And that's the key, actually. It's the most important part.
yeah. We don't want to be too critical of others' experiences, but my take on Mr. Fenn is that he's a little too quick to reinforce his own beliefs and not question them too deeply. And that's a failing we all have, Carl. I mean, that's a classic
Yes,
human
and it's not a
failing.
it's really not a failing. I mean, you could apply that word to it, but it's really a lack of awareness because
Yeah,
that has to come from somewhere.
true.
I
Yeah,
used to be, completely divorced from any alignment or connection to the divine because I was enamored of science, and that took me further into a kind of cul-de-sac.
sure.
So I had to figure out
Yeah,
where God was and move closer myself. So
yes.
we're all separate right now. If you haven't noticed, we don't see God in the room. So
Right.
we're
And we all have
all
our own
suffering this
cul-de-sacs to
dilemma.
deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. U.S. creator Fenn wrote, I quickly became so involved in worship that I was what I call, and the Bible seems to say, as quote unquote, being in the spirit. That is, I wasn't aware of anything around me, only the realm of spirit. This is similar to what Steiner, St. Faustina, and many other mystics and seers have reported throughout the ages. Some might refer to it as quote unquote being in ecstasy or an ecstatic experience. Fenn reports that it's not our physical body and senses that participate, but that of our spirit man, quote unquote, a spiritual counterpart with its own sensory capabilities that sees, hears, smells, etc. What can Creator tell us?
All right, Creator says, these descriptions are an authentic retelling of personal experience of being raised up by the divine, with an opening of the mind and heart and the senses as well to a higher state of vibration, a greater state of purity and sense of completion. That is what leads to feeling not only buoyant, but in a state of exalted completion without a need for anything else, because the feeling is one of total happiness. This state of being is the simple absence of negativity in any form. It is rarely achieved by a human being and never by other physical extraterrestrials in your galaxy. So it is not a recipe for knowing God. It is an end product of feeling God within. Historically, the most common path to divine awareness has been cultivated by worship of one kind or another. This is because of tradition and some manipulation of thinking about the nature of the divine being a harsh and judgmental overseer, demanding obedience and fealty to divine decrees and expectations. That is, in fact, an impediment to achieving a high vibration, because starting in fear is heading in the wrong direction. There needs to be a feeling of love and trust within the being to rise in vibration, to be a match to us. It is that match and shared experiencing of loftiness that allows us to share some of our makeup more personally. And it can be quite profound indeed. When the expectation is one has to make a sacrifice in order to arrive at God's doorstep, that again is a departure from the best and easiest path. Simply from the expectation, it must be hard, it must be onerous, and it must cost you something significant. So the expectation is there must be pain involved, hard work, difficulty, and a risk of failure that will compound things and cause worsening that could even condemn you from failing in the eyes of God. Here again is no way to start a journey to enlightenment and jubilation. The only benefit of such a perspective is that it does require a strong commitment at the outset to make the journey. Most failures come about because people are half-hearted and they undertake. They do not put themselves fully on the line, so to speak, from fear of failure, and then condemn themselves to that likelihood without realizing if they had made a stronger commitment and believed in themselves, they would have had the wherewithal to bring about a victory. This is very clear to us because we know where you come from and what you are made of. You are part of us, after all, and capable of things far beyond your understanding and level of belief while being in the physical plane. Some of that is a consequence of your current configuration because you are indeed quite limited compared to when you are a light being before your incarnations. But there is a difference between wanting to fly. No one should be able to do that, and yearning for greater freedom and capability, but not fully believing it is even possible. That is the gap you contend with. So the discipline and hard work of devotional worship can be a route to growth and expansion through greater faith in cultivating the necessary beliefs to flourish in a higher state of awareness and function. But it is still a harder path than necessary. Given that belief must come from somewhere, if that is the only way it can be cultivated, it is worth doing.
You know, we could talk about just this one channeling for the rest of the show and still not do it justice, Carl. There's so many things here that are just so incredibly important. This last sentence, even given that belief must come from somewhere, if it's the only way it can be cultivated, it is worth doing. Ultimately, the divine is pragmatic. The divine is going to work with what's there, and if what's there is what's there, then let's use what's there. So, Creator is saying that worship is not necessarily the highest and best means for attaining oneness with God, but it's what we're dealing. It's the most common form because of our history of corruption and the fact that we have pretend gods in the form of the interlopers that have probably acted like tough overseers and expected this kind of fearfulness. And so we're trying to overcome that now, at least subconsciously anyway. And by engaging in worship, especially like somebody like Saint Faustina, who had led a ascetic life, with many self deprivations, you're overcoming the belief. You have the belief that you have to earn it, right? You have to earn this ecstatic experience. And so if you pay the dues, you overcome that belief, and then you can have the experience. So we see the divine pragmatism here in its full flower, Carl.
Well, everyone's different, are they not? So people come to God in all sorts of differing ways. And it's ironic that the major spokespersons for the divine are at the same time tending to mislead people and using things that has some darkness that's been introduced along the way. So this creates a kind of a mixed blessing, and it makes it a bit harder. But Creator is reassuring at the same time, no matter where you start and how you go about it. If you keep going and you have the right goal in mind, you can get there. And that's the important thing to remember here, because it isn't about what you do, it's the goal and sticking to it. If you fail in some way as the way you see it, you won't fail in God's eyes, because the divine knows you're on the journey, and that's what matters. So don't lose heart here.
Yeah.
And if you're struggling, it might be your own problems and not the gap with the divine. That keeps you separate, but everything is solvable. And that's the take-home message here. There are different ways to go about it, but you are wanted. God wants you back in the fold, and that counts more than anything else.
Yeah, that's an important message, Carl, that that there's not just one way, even though a lot of people think there is. If you've talked to a few fundamentalists, they're all going to say that worship is the only way to get to God. It's like, well, that's the way for you, but not necessarily for everybody. But that's an important point. U.S. creator Fenn, in his spiritual visit to Africa, soon learned the humble farmer was in fact Muslim. Fenn confessed, "In my utter astonishment, I protested to my angel, 'My father, God, blesses Muslims?' The angel responded with a look of surprise on his face that indicated he thought that I would know the answer already," Fenn wrote. As I suddenly saw the involvement of the Father in the tiniest of everyday happenings all over the world, and what his involvement was without discrimination between saved and unsaved, I was overwhelmed by his holiness. Only one so holy could walk in such love. Unquote. Being a fundamentalist, Fenn does not have a concept of karma and past lives to work with. Can what he is describing be attributed wholly to the workings of karma or the workings of God above and beyond karma? What is Creator's perspective?
All right. And these are Creator's words. What he wrote is portrayed and sounds like a God busily attending to everyone, shaping their lives, bringing about rewarding outcomes for the blessed and devout, and a kind of punishment and failure for those who fall by the wayside and lack determination and sufficient reverence to go the distance as believers. The actuality is that he was sensing the fact God is everywhere because God is within. That was a reward and a blessing for him of divine wisdom and perspective. To appreciate God is not distant ever, but always with you, even at times of suffering, impoverishment, and isolation. What is impaired is human perspective. Through corruption and an inability to understand, God is always available for the asking, and to have the requisite inner belief quotient for us to reward you with a response by way of an outreach you can sense in some way. This can be the greatest of rewards, especially when one suffers. But being in a state of depletion and dishevelment works against this. It is extremely unlikely to connect to the divine from a state of fear and great pain. This is where divine grace comes in. And when people are raised up to have a turning point through healing, it is often made possible through the efforts of others, using prayer, for example, inviting us to help the sufferer. This we are always eager to do, but must stay within the rules of engagement in what is allowable, given we cannot change you or your world unless it is requested from the human side with a high belief quotient and belief in the self and one's worthiness to receive divine assistance. Those key factors are usually missing or in short supply, and that keeps us away. So, what Fenn was perceiving as divinity in everything is one level of perception and interpretation that is literally correct, as all human beings are extensions of the divine, and we are ever present amongst you. The problem is all that can happen to drive a wedge between us, create a distancing through a gap of some kind. That is usually a shortage of belief on the human side, with many things getting in the way, especially fear or any other negative emotions and beliefs. This is what you are here to work on, to learn about, and understand ways to surmount the obstacles. All of the discord represents a consequence of evil from corruption of humanity that has spread eventually to all who incarnate to some degree or another. Part of the requirement for solving the problem of evil is to rise above it. First of all, to have enough wherewithal to bring about a solution. Knowing how to do that is a further challenge and has been a long time brewing. But you are very, very close in understanding these things and being in a position to turn things around, to work to your advantage and allow the conquering of evil for all of time.
So, Creator's basically re-emphasizing an answer he gave to an earlier question, which was that the divine is not, in fact, running our lives for us, and that it's a partnership, and the fact that we've earned our role in that partnership that brings everything about, and that what Fenn was actually seeing wasn't God running everybody's lives, but the fact that God is within everybody, you know, and seeing something very, very important, but again, probably not connecting all the dots to the extent needed. Carl, still there, Carl?
Yes, this is a good lesson in being grounded and seeing the big picture and keeping that in mind. Not so easy to do,
No,
especially when something goes wrong. And that can throw you off stride and can make you fall for a time. And you're lying there in the dirt wondering what happened. Well, you may have to pick yourself up, but God is always with you and available as a resource and a source of strength. So you can always reach out. And the more you learn to do that, the better it will work and the more powerfully your saving will take place.
yeah, absolutely. U.S. creator Fenn, big fundamentalist, emphasized the importance of, quote, being saved versus not being saved, unquote. Yet, in studying the replies of Jesus that he wrote about in his book, nothing was really shared that seemed to endorse that outlook, while Jesus was indeed careful not to disturb that belief or overtly contradict it. Can Creator share with us if there really is such a status of being saved or unsaved? And if not, how did such a notion take root and why is it so quickly embraced and adhered to?
All right, Creator tells us the broad meaning of being saved and why it resonates so strongly within the hearts of countless humans is the slaking of a thirst of long standing to be close once again to the divine. So one is no longer living alone in a state of confusion, doubt, and fear. Because the presence of the divine is the antidote to separation. The separation through your ignorance in coming into a physical existence and having to start from scratch to learn about the divine and then grow to understand, accept it, and feel accepted by it. This is a challenge for everyone, and many get lost along the way. The image of Jesus Christ is so powerful as a savior because it is both water and wine to the thirsty and bread to the famished, who are often in a state of desperation, because nothing in physical existence can truly equal the bliss of experiencing divine love and the deep knowing of who you truly are and what that all means. It is quite profound and transcends human experience. There is an inner knowing of this, and the visage of Jesus Christ, whether in the flesh as a spirit presence or simply inner knowing and acceptance that allows being touched by the divine, will be a tremendous blessing for those who yearn for a reunion with God. This is what being saved by Jesus Christ will provide. The barrier is lack of belief and readiness energetically to open the heart to divine love. It will be given to all who ask, although few are truly ready and open to the experience. But it is their lack of preparation standing in the way. They do not realize it, but they have moved away from the divine somewhere along the way and need a means to come back into greater divine alignment, to be raised up. That is the promise of being saved by Jesus, and why it is so powerful. Many times it is described as an act of surrender, and that is quite apt because many are, in effect, holdouts from becoming lost and doubting the possibility of finding their way back to the ultimate truth they seek. It is by letting go many times that will allow the divine love to flood in and save them at long last.
So this makes sense on so many levels. A lot of people that become very fervent, born again Christians and feel like they are saved and that they weren't saved previously have many of them have had dramatic experience in the fact that before they quote unquote found Jesus, they were stressed, they were fearful, they were living difficult lives, perhaps even hopeless ones, and then experienced a taste of divine partnership, a taste of the divine love through a letting go, through a surrender, usually with a lot of encouragement from other people, especially in the church setting. And the experience can be such a dramatic change from their previous experience that was so dark that it now becomes easy to understand how they can feel like they've been saved. It's not as much of a mystery to me personally anymore, Carl.
Well, and it's interesting to think of it in the perspective that we're being taught about human divine partnership, that it's not suddenly a light bulb turns on and they say the right words to themselves, or somehow they're able to push their fear to the side and then they have this relief. What is really happening is God flooding into them in their awareness. That makes it real. They're not paying lip service to an idea. They just finally realize, I'll try this now and see what happens. And then they feel good for a while because they, talk themselves into it. And it's kind of an inner wishful thinking or something, as the skeptics would see. This is real. It's energy, and it's a divine touch from the Almighty that touches their heart. That's why it is so profound. Yes, the contrast between deep, dark suffering and feeling hopeless and suddenly realizing something can change me, something can change the way my life is going. That is not only a relief, but an inspiration all wrapped into one. This is what the divine does to help motivate us. and
it's a
it's
lot
magic.
easier to see how they can subscribe to the idea that it's a form of that's salvation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's majestic.
Yeah. But again, creator can't lead, right? So maybe they're collectively they might be over interpreting their experience is perhaps one of the hazards. But that's a hazard again with all of us to not see the whole explanation.
But see, now that's just step one. So one has to keep going.
Exactly. Yes. It's not.
To make
You're
the
not
most of
done.
Yeah. So this is something that's important to realize, that getting back in touch with the divine is all well and good. And if you haven't got that, it is just absolutely fabulous because it's bringing in new possibilities. But then the hard work begins. If you're
there you
raised
go.
up a bit and you're less anxious, you're going to be better off. But you'll get used to that. It's kind of a new set point, a new foundation, and you can start to take that for granted after a while and think you're done. But life will probably show you different. but it's a good journey to be on because there's no end, and the rewards get better and better.
Yes, absolutely. U.S. creator. Fenn would also frequently ask his angel and Jesus to couch their messages and teachings to him in terms of quote unquote chapter and verse of the Bible. Fenn apparently thought this was quote unquote right and proper, but never asked either his angel or Jesus about it. By confining them to chapter and verse, it seems Fenn was limiting the range of divine response they could actually deliver and remain within the rules of engagement. What could Creator tell us about imposing such a limit on divine beings?
All right, Creator says, you are seeing correctly that there are pitfalls in being too doctrinaire and assuming that one's knowledge is correct and true from descriptions, even in the scriptures, of how to conduct oneself spiritually to good effect. It is an unfortunate truth that even the scriptures contain corrupt thinking and distortions, and many important divine teachings have been removed through the ages. This is no different than the censorship of today. It is still widespread, where those in authority expunge testimony, destroy records, lock up the whistleblowers and truth tellers, or they may well end up dead with much of their knowledge unreported, which is the point of their elimination, to silence them. Given the state of widespread ignorance and lack of sophistication in ancient times, the universal presence of authoritarian regimes quick to kill citizens for having the wrong thoughts, the very idea is truly laughable that all divine revelations have been uniformly preserved with accuracy and thoroughness from ancient times on to the present day, and defies common sense and reason. But this is what the authorities want you to believe. They want you to accept a partial set of teachings as the be all and end all, knowing it is impoverished and largely ineffectual because it is easy to take a half measure, implement it poorly, and end up with even less in the way of an outcome. It is hard to go from a halfway starting point to the whole, and that has held humanity back for thousands of years now. So, this was narrow thinking on the part of Fenn, who saw the scriptures as an absolute divine truth, the words of God, and therefore sacrosanct, and devoted himself slavishly to a word for word adherence. And this was indeed a narrowing of perspective that prevented new divine wisdom to be imparted. Here again, the important lesson is you are in charge of your world and not us. We will answer your call. We will support you and assist in many ways if you ask. But you must know what you are about and must work mightily on your end to better understand your circumstances, what has gone wrong, what is missing, what is needed, and ideally, even how we might go about supplying the missing pieces. In other words, you must learn to become a teacher and mentor for yourself and others through hard won divine wisdom. You must pay attention, you must focus, and you must think creatively to explore the possibilities to fill in the many gaps in knowledge left by the incomplete history of humanity. Putting constraints on what the divine can tell you is not the way to go about this. It is a prescription for maintaining a mediocre level of understanding and a primitive perspective at best when it is time for the opposite to happen. It is time to break out, break the mold, look in new directions with opened eyes and heart to expect the unexpected. And that will bring many, many rewards and a broadened perspective of the divine and humanity as well.
Well, that was a strong opposition on the part of Creator to the idea that the Bible is the be all and end all. I can see the temptation in wanting to think that because you want to believe in an all powerful God, and you clearly want to believe in a God that would deliver unto us, his children, a means by which we could know him with certainty. And so there's a temptation to, put that into the Bible and think that that is the be all end all. It's a much easier way to think about things. It's not as difficult. So I can see the
Well, and
temptation,
it's
but
and it's a yeah, it's the gold standard. It's been around, for everyone as long as they've lived in today's world anyway. And it's well-meaning, but lots of things are
yeah,
well-meaning, but we're
yeah,
still struggling here. There's still problems that are unsolved.
right.
And having good intentions is a great starting point, but it doesn't provide solutions. Those you have to think of. You have to devise a deeper understanding and awareness to see what is a true solution for the problems in the world.
Yeah.
Good intentions aren't going to fill that gap. There's a reality gap, there's a knowledge gap, an awareness gap, and an understanding gap. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. And these words are hard to hear for many, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who stumble on this as fundamentalists and say, "Oh my God, these people are dark. They must be in the grip of Satan, as they're talking against the Bible and so on." And it's not that we're trying to talk against anything. We're trying to talk up the divine as being
Absolutely.
bigger than we think
Yeah.
and have more. There's more there than we know yet. It's remaining to be discovered. You're not
Well, I
going to
think there's two,
find it all written up.
no, there's two things here. It's not only is the divine bigger than we can possibly imagine, but we're bigger than we often imagine we are. And I think that's an important lesson also. U.S. creator Fenn's books were fascinating, but like so many other spiritual treatises, failed in any real attempt to grapple with the problem of evil. There was, of course, no mention of extraterrestrials. Can it be assumed that is simply because, well, he never asked? Can Creator tell us why empowered prayer and the Lightworker Healing Protocol are the genuine means for dealing with this most important of issues that most still do not have any clue about, even many with profound spiritual gifts?
All right. And this is what Creator tells us. Your question is putting the finger on the problem in a powerful way, using an excellent example of the dilemma you are in. Because you are in charge by virtue of your free agency and free will to think and believe as you choose, it is up to you to learn and grow, not to us. It is up to you to find out why problems exist and seek ways to get divine assistance that are precise enough and powerful enough to help you overcome your adversaries. When you are in a state of ignorance, we have little to work with because we must use your lead, your understanding, awareness, and instructions in order to act on your behalf. When you are in a state of ignorance and feeling helpless, there is nothing to empower us, no useful fuel for us to use to bring about a divine solution for your dilemma. This is what has been missing all through the ages. There have been many would be light workers, people of faith, spiritual leaders, and spokespersons providing much encouragement for a return to the divine and stoking the inner passion for upliftment and leading people in the right direction, at least, to make some gains in understanding and some divine blessings as a consequence. But this has been far too little to surmount the evil in your world. It is evil that is on the ascendancy, even as the spiritual community talks about a shift in consciousness, a coming ascension, and a return of love. The saying is very apt that talk is cheap. This will not happen with you as a passive observer, not believing fervently or acting with passion, but as a passive bystander and would be witness to something you feel is not only deserved, but inevitable because others have told you so, if not in so many words, by their own passivity and naive complacency that things will all work out. It is only a matter of time, and only thinking positive is needed when nothing could be further from the truth. Humanity is in the crosshairs of assassins, an extraterrestrial cabal of multiple civilizations who have been truly running the world throughout human history because they were corrupted long ago, before humanity existed, by the fallen angelic loss of divinity. And that has infected you through direct possession of your being by dark spirit attachments to undermine you, weaken your faith, grow your doubts, and stoke your fears in as many ways as they can. People vary in susceptibility, but your entire culture is in the grip of evil, looking for a secular solution of false beliefs and limited perspectives that will lead you nowhere, or even towards a diminishment in multiple ways that will compound your lack of power and increase your helplessness. That is why empowered prayer and the Lightworker Healing Protocol are the answer here, and nothing else will make this happen. The religious believers have their thoughts and heart in the right place, but have a lack of understanding of what the problems truly are, how to invite a divine intervention with specificity and sufficient power to right the wrongs and create a turning point for the better, to stave off your annihilation and become a force for good that is unstoppable. That is yet to happen, but can only come using the tools you have been given through empowered prayer and the Lightworker Healing Protocol. So the right knowledge will be employed in the right way with effectiveness, which can truly raise up the interlopers enough to leave you be and allow humanity to heal sufficiently for the grand ascension to finally happen. That is your only way out of this dilemma. Your channel, through his diligence, creativity, and passion, have uncovered the secrets of why the world is suffering so, and the path to enlightenment, which is a healing journey, not just the gaining of knowledge and wisdom. That knowledge and wisdom must be turned into many kinds of actions, and being able to move more effectively to ward off evil, counter the negativity on all levels of your world through manipulation of everyone and everything, and to bring much needed healing for the wrongs of the past in creating negative karma that has dragged everyone down and everything else with it. The interlopers working against you, knowing how crippling this becomes when you are entering a downward spiral in reaction to the immensity of all the negativity you've been exposed to and been wounded by through hundreds of lifetimes, never having been healed. That is why enlightenment is a healing journey, and the only way to get there is through a serious and concerted divine participation at your invitation, with sufficient knowledge, specificity, and understanding of how the divine realm heals. That is what these tools give you. They are the keys to the kingdom, the keys to your future. And if you use them, you can win. If you fail to heed our warnings and surrender to doubt and complacency, you will lose this last chance at victory and will go down.
And you can get these tools, these incredibly important tools, at getwisdom.com/prayer. That's our empowered prayer book. And get the ebook on the Lightworker Healing Protocol at getwisdom.com/LHP, getwisdom.com/LHP. That's all the time we have for this month's Get Wisdom Live, Carl. Thanks, everybody.
Keep going and be well.